What is up, beautiful people? We have Ehab with me today, Rehab with Ehab. He's a really cool guy. I found him on social media. I thought he'd be a really cool guest to have on the podcast. It is episode 126, and yeah, I'm excited. Thank you for coming on, my man.
Yeah, man. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, no, it's super awesome. So real quick, for the people that don't know you, give like a quick real estate resume on just like what you've done in real estate, what you do in real estate, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, I'm a full-time real estate investor. I've been full-time since 2019. Prior to that, worked in corporate America. Did the grind like a lot of people are doing and have done, and tried to find my way through real estate. I've been investing for a little bit over 20 years, doing all the wrong things, trying out flipping, wholesaling, landlording, and ultimately landed to where I am today, where I do a lot of short-term rentals. So I have about 25 short-term rentals that I own, including like a 16-unit boutique short-term rental, and I manage about 25 others for other people. So total a portfolio of about 50 short-term rentals that I manage. I still have a few long-term rentals left. I dabble in building some new houses too. I'm building 13 houses this year, so it's a little bit of a little side project, but my core business is definitely my short-term rental business.
I love it. I love it so much. So it's mainly short-term rentals. Did you start off with short-term rentals? Was that the first thing you ever did was bought an Airbnb, or how did that work?
No, the first thing I ever did was in my 20s buying a house that I flipped. Like a lot of people, I got excited by watching HGTV shows. Back then in my 20s, they had get rich quick infomercials, guys that had like yachts and good looking girls and all that cool stuff. So those were the things that got me interested back then. And my first venture was flipping, because I think that's the only strategy that I realized existed in my 20s at the time. Obviously, there's a ton of different ways to invest in real estate, but that was my first deal. Pretty cosmetic flip. I think it was about a $12,000 rehab budget. Unfortunately, made about $8,000 on that flip, so I made money, and kind of motivated me to keep going.
I love it. So I always start with this every single time. I mean, this is Skorch the Fears, right? And I always find it interesting how everything I think ends up coming back to fears, right? I think most of my audience has to do with just newer real estate investors. So what were your fears when you were just starting out, whether it was in your 20s or when you feel like you started doing it full time, or when you feel like your true beginning was? What were the fears that you were dealing with, and how'd you overcome them?
Yeah. The crazy thing about the journey, especially those who want to be on the journey to full-time real estate investing, right? And that's a very different journey. That's building a real estate business. That's not just going out there and doing a deal or two or even three, right? You're really talking about building a business. So the fears I had were various along the different phases along my journey. I would say the first fear that I had was the fear of disappointing my parents. I came from uber middle class parents. Like, my parents did not invest in anything. Not even, when I say nothing, I mean not even the stock market. They didn't even believe in that. It was just go to work, make your money, and put it in the bank. And that's all they ever did. And so I remember I owned a house that I was living in, and I came to my parents and I said, I'm going to buy a house to fix up. And they were so confused because they said, well, you already have a house. Why would you buy another house? And it definitely created a lot of doubt in me, because I asked myself, why am I buying another house when I already have one? And that was kind of their old generation, their old school way of thinking. Like, people don't own two houses. You own one house and you buy it, you live in it, and then you die in that house, So that was probably my biggest fear, because I didn't want to disappoint my parents. I loved my parents. I came from a really close Middle Eastern family. And, it just wasn't something that we did in terms of investing and building business and trying to create wealth. We were just hardworking people, and you worked until you were 65 at the same company. And that's what you did where I came from.
Gotcha. I gotcha. Makes sense. So then it was kind of like what your family had told you. And then what would you call that? Like the fear of the unknown? Or like, what would you like? Was it like you just were like, oh God, am I going to fail? Like, what specifically was the fear? I know your family was telling you, don't do this. but maybe just
Yeah.
a little bit more.
Yeah, it's essentially the fear of disappointing them, right? It's like, am I going to buy this house and am I going to lose money, and am I going to make this catastrophic mistake in front of them and justify that they were right, like that I should not be buying another house when I already owned a house, right? So it's, that was the fear, just disappointing your parents.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So how'd you get through that? Like, what did you do? Were you just like a screw it? Like, what did you do to be like, mom and dad, like, no, I got this.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time reading books, on forums, trying to get as much information as I could. Learned about the 70% rule for buying houses. I tried to put in the effort and the due diligence and the training that I needed to have the confidence that I actually was making a good decision. And then ultimately, when I did decide to move forward, I had validation, from my realtor who was helping me buy the house and my lender who was lending on it. So you kind of had several different sources helping you validate that what you were doing was right. And ultimately, when you rehab it and you sell it and you get that check at the title company, and I remember it was $8,000, and to me now that's not a big amount of money, but $8,000 in your 20s, especially when you have a job, that's a great bonus for the year. And it was affirmation that I actually did something that made a return and was profitable. And that's the ultimate, way to overcome your fears is having success.
I love it. That makes sense. I mean, yeah, true. I mean, just becoming successful is probably the easiest way to do it, right? Um, so that's an insanely small flip profit, right? Like, I mean, flips, you want to be usually making a lot more money than that. So where did you go from there? You did your first flip. It sounds like you were kind of living in it or doing the work yourself. Very much typical first flip. Where did you go from there?
Yeah. So I mean, all I knew as far as real estate investment strategy was flipping. That's all I was exposed to. And so I decided that I was going to start looking for another property to flip, which at the time I was just kind of looking on MLS, or I was talking to realtors, not doing anything super creative to try to find deals. And I also didn't really have a solid strategy. I mean, I thought if I flipped one house a year, I would be on my way to starting to create financial freedom, which obviously didn't get me there. But when I made that first check, and as a 20 something year old, like I thought I was one of the richest people in the world. So I went out and looked for another one, and ultimately found another flip, and that kind of was my strategy for a long time. Actually, from 27 when I did my first flip all the way to 40, I would just kind of flip a property here and there. I had a decent job. I would go out, find a property, spend 6 months, 4 months just remodeling it, selling it, flipping it, and then just kind of do that once or twice a year just to make a little bit of extra money. And that was my real estate strategy for the longest time.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So then, okay, so we do flipping. How do we learn? How do we learn about Airbnb, right? Also, like, I don't know if you mind me asking, like, what was the timeline of this? Was Airbnb even a thing when you were starting out, right?
Yeah, apparently Airbnb has been around a long time. I think 20 plus years, as of today. I think probably a lot of us didn't know that, or really weren't using as much. But that was my strategy. And then at 40, which is pretty much kind of a landmark year for a lot of people. I looked back on the last 13 years doing real estate, and I said, where did I go wrong? I've been doing this 13 years, and anytime you do something for that long of a period of time, you would think that you would have either, gotten to your goal, or you'd be really close to your goal. And I didn't understand that flipping, one house a year, even though it was great to make an extra 20, $30,000, because by the time I was getting better at flips, I was making 20 or $30,000 on a flip, which was really good. Especially when I had like a six-figure job at the time as I was getting older and older. So I thought I was on the right path, but I looked back on it and I realized, yeah, I'd made some extra money, but of course, I'd also spent a lot more money because I was making more. And at 40 years old, I had this resume of flips behind me, but nothing to actually show for it at that age, right? Nothing that was creating steady cash flow. Not, I didn't have a flipping business or a rental business, nothing that was even remotely close to replacing my job income. And that was kind of a big aha moment for me where I said, I have royally screwed up over the last 13 years somewhere along the way. And it was my strategy that didn't get me to the goal that I wanted. So that was the big mistake I made. Um, you asked me the question about how I got into Airbnb. Well, so it wasn't even a straight path from there. At that point, when I was flipping single family homes, I said, well, let me go flip multifamily homes because everyone talks about multifamilies, more units, more zeros at the end of the paycheck, all that good stuff. So I went and bought my first sixplex at the age of 40, total fixer-upper property. Started renovating it, and this was in about 2017. And right as I was wrapping up the renovation, a guy came to me, a guy that I knew, and he said, "Hey, Ehab, what are you going to do with these?" I said, "Well, I'm either going to flip it or probably like rent them out. I think I need to start owning rentals so I can start really replacing my job income because my goal is to quit my job and do real estate full time." And he said, "Well, rent them to me because I'm going to rent them from you and furnish them and put them on Airbnb." And that was the first time I'd heard the words Airbnb in 2017, 2018, right as I was wrapping up my remodel on that sixplex. And so I said, well, what's Airbnb? And he made the mistake of explaining it to me and explaining how much money that it can make. And then I said, well, maybe I'll do it myself. He said, well, no, well, at least rent to me, 4 out of the 6, and maybe try it on 2 yourself, and rent me the other 4, because he was going to rental arbitrage and do Airbnb. And I said, now I'm gonna do the whole thing Airbnb. And so my first Airbnb was a sixplex. I went live with all 6 units in 2018, and that was my first exposure to short-term rentals.
I love it. So it's so interesting why, because I mean, a lot of people do long-term rentals. I partnered with somebody on an Airbnb. That partner wasn't a good operator, so then I was stuck running an Airbnb, which I personally didn't like very much. It's a lot of work. It's not. I think it's hospitality, not real estate. I mean, it's sort of both, but it's more like running a hotel than owning a rental, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what attracted you to it? Like, in your eyes, what are the pros? What do you feel like are the cons? Like, why did you stick with that exit strategy versus any other?
Yeah. Well, number one was the money, right? At 40 years old, I needed to figure out a strategy to replace my job income because that was my goal. And I mean, I tell people all the time, as long as you know what you're doing in real estate, there's not necessarily a wrong way to invest, right? Like if you flip a house and you make $20,000, you knew what you were doing. Like you did a good deal. The problem is that there is a wrong way to invest in real estate that doesn't align with your goals. So kind of like the mistake I made for 13 years. If you go out and you flip a house and you make 20,000 or 30,000, but your goal is financial freedom and replacing your job that's $100,000 a year job, well, that's not a strategy that's aligning with your goals, and that's not going to necessarily get you financial freedom. That's going to get you a job that's going to require a lot of flips every year. So when I saw that this sixplex on Airbnb made me $15,000 a month gross on Airbnb, which when I subtracted my mortgage, which was with about $5,000, electricity, water, cleaning, all that probably added up to about, $4,000 or so. I subtracted 15,000 from 9,000, which was 5,000 for the mortgage and 4,000 for my expenses. And that left me with $6,000 in profit on that one property alone. And when I looked at my 6-figure consulting job that I have, and I compared the 6,000 to it, I said to myself, wow, 6,000 profit on one property. Now this is a strategy that's going to eventually replace my job income. And sure enough, it certainly ended up doing that, because after my sixplex, I bought a fourplex, also did really well on Airbnb, a duplex. And then ultimately, I got the confidence to buy a 16 unit, completely rundown apartment complex where I had to kind of kick out all the people that were just the squatters that were there. One of the Houston Congress people called me because she thought I was kicking out all the homeless people that was there. And it ended up being a big kind of fiasco. But ultimately, I removed all these people that were just kind of squatting there, renovated the entire property, put them all on Airbnb. And that's, been my most profitable property yet in my portfolio. So, I mean, I have a very healthy 6-figure a month short-term rental business now, with all those properties combined. And I also have my property management business where I'm managing other people's properties. So I finally figured it out. It took me a long time, and it took me 5 years from the moment I bought my first short-term rental, that sixplex I was telling you about. It took me 5 years to grow that portfolio, but it ultimately just came down to about adding one really good property a year to my portfolio, and that's what I did, and that helped me grow to this 6-figure a month business.
I love it. So like, what do you recommend for somebody? Like, let's say they're starting out. My business has mostly been flipping and wholesaling, right? I own a couple rentals, right? But I've definitely been like, damn, I need to keep more of these. But I personally kind of hate single family rentals, right? They work as Airbnbs if you're willing to do the operating. I guess, how do you find the sixplexes, the 10 units, the 12 units, the bigger multifamily? That's where it seems to make more sense to me. I don't know. What's your acquisition strategy?
So I teach a real simple strategy where it's like, I'm not that guy who's doing 1 or 2 deals a month. I'm like, let me find one really good deal a year for my portfolio. And even working mildly hard to look for deals. And mind you, the only way I found any of my deals is through just networking, like talking to wholesalers or realtors, or from MLS. Like those have been my only 3 sources of deals: realtors, wholesalers, looking myself on MLS. I don't direct mail market. I don't do anything paid to find deals. But just by doing that and staying on top of MLS and checking it, frequently, I'm able to add one really good property to my portfolio every year. And the thing about these short-term rental multifamily properties is they do create a ton of cash flow, right? So that sixplex I was telling you about made $6,000 a month in profit. I have a duplex with a pool. I also buy everything I buy. I do the BRRRR BNB strategy. So I buy them, I renovate them. So I buy them really cheap. The duplex with a pool, I probably clear $5,000-6,000 a month in profit with that one as well, because pools are a great amenity to have on Airbnb. My 16plex makes about $40,000 to $50,000 a month in revenue and gross. So I probably walk away making about $20,000 a month with my 16plex. And so there's just adding one really good property to your portfolio a year. If you're clearing $4,000, $3,000, $5,000 a month, think about in 5 years, that's anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000 in profit every single month that you're bringing in, and that's enough to replace most people's income, and that's all it takes to be able to do that through short-term rentals.
Gotcha. I love it. So, what do you say to the people who are like, "Damn, but that's so much work. Like, isn't it an insane amount of work to do Airbnbs?" What do you say to those people?
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, that choose your heart expression, right? Like, is it a lot of work to buy and renovate properties for 5 years, and operate them as a hospitality business, kind of like you described, right? Or is it more work to work for somebody for, 30 or 40 years until you're 65, and then hope that you've saved up enough to retire, right? Like you have to choose your heart. And just like you, I don't love the hospitality business. I don't love Airbnbs, but fortunately, like everything in real estate, when you get big enough, that's when you start hiring people. And so I have 2 virtual assistants that are my assistant property managers. They kind of operate. One operates the day shift, one operates the night shift. And between the 2 of them, like they are super customer focused, like superstars, right? Like they'll have a smile on their face. A guest can be complaining, and they're just like, "We are so happy to help you. Let us take care of that." And they're all the things that I am not. And I knew the moment I bought that 16plex, that this is the property that I'm going to hire my first virtual assistant, because there's no way I'm going to be handling these guest questions and requests and inquiries on my own, right? So you just have to find the things that you're good at and the things that you just absolutely don't want to do, and then bring in the right team to surround yourself with, right? And that's just the key to growing in any business, and especially in real estate as well.
So with Airbnb specifically, what do you think of all the regulation that's coming out? Because I mean, I know like cities are kind of cracking down more or less. Are there any really good cities you like for buying in for regulation wise? Um, that's also one of my worries for Airbnb is like it seems like a lot of cities are like, no, this doesn't work. You're like screwing up the rental market. What do you say about that? Like, how do you what markets do you feel like are the best ones right now?
Yeah. I have mostly been focused in Houston because it's a great market for buying properties. It's certainly become more saturated over the years. I think a lot of people know that Houston has a lot to offer in terms of buying opportunities. It also has a lot to offer in terms of like value stacking. So the city itself has the Texas Medical Center. It has stadiums. It has activities, all the things that you kind of want to have around your short-term rentals that attracts people to come stay there. So this is a big market for me in Houston. All my Airbnbs are primarily in Houston. I would just say that the key is to look for areas that have attractions that people are interested in. Think about where you'd want to vacation. Think about places that are that have beaches, that have lakes, that would be places that you'd want to visit, or that you think other people would want to visit. And you can do research using tools like AirDNA, or websites that allow you to do research on different markets and see what the opportunities are there for short-term rentals, because they're pulling data from Airbnb, VRBO, from everywhere to tell you where the best investment markets are.
I love it. I love it so much. So, um, your strategy is buy one a year, right? And is it like so? Is it just kind of just waiting for that right one and just being okay with just operating the other ones until then? It's an interesting strategy in the sense that at least in my head, it feels boring. Not to be like rude or anything, but it feels boring because I'm like, but at the same time, I feel like it's a great strategy in the sense that you never buy a bad deal, right? So I don't know. I guess my question is like, how'd you come up with that strategy, or why do you like that strategy more than buying tons of deals?
Yeah. Well, number one, it's practical, right? Like, people need boring and they need practical to be able to do it while working a full-time job and while having a family, right? I mean, if I've dabbled in wholesaling, right? Wholesaling, I had a wholesaling mentor that had me wholesaling properties off the MLS, believe it or not. And in order to do that, excuse me, in order to do that, my mentor told me to send 30 emails a day, which I hired a virtual assistant for, but I was sending 30 emails a day to realtors that had fixer-upper properties on the MLS. And we would offer them 70% of the list price. Whatever the list price was, we would offer 70%. 30 emails a day, 4 days a week. And then on Friday, we'd follow up with the people who didn't respond. And if a realtor responded back and had any kind of interest, that would be the deal that I would go look at and invest my time in. But the problem with that strategy is it's very labor intensive. Like, even though I had a VA doing a lot of the email sending and organizing it in a spreadsheet for me to look at, like that required a ton of work. It was effective. It got me one or two wholesale deals a month off of the MLS. So I wasn't even spending money on direct mail marketing or robo texting or any of those things. But it was like not practical, not enjoyable, and really a ton of like administrative work going through that. So when you have a full-time job, you need something that's practical, that's kind of boring, and that you can balance with your career and with your family. And I think asking people to find one good deal a year is very doable, because quite frankly, if your goal is financial freedom and you're not even willing to do one deal a year, you're probably not that serious about trying to create wealth and escape the rat race, not putting in even that minimum amount of work. So the best businesses out there are the ones that are very focused and they just do the simple things really, really well. And that's what I do. Is I it's not very glamorous. It's a pretty uh, fixed process in how we find properties, in how we automate with our guests, how we interact with our guests. The part that is very creative about what I do, though, and is actually makes it more interesting, is in the renovation and in the interior design of the properties. So I've done some really cool things with my properties, buying like old mechanic shops and converting them to Airbnbs. Obviously, converting the 16-unit apartment into an Airbnb. So I've done some cool things with the property themselves. But yeah, once a year, finding a good deal, that's practical, it's boring, and it's very doable for the average person.
I love it. No, it totally makes sense, especially if you have another job too at the same time, right? Like, because you got to do your job, you got to be able to manage all of that stuff. When do you feel like someone should quit their job? Like, at what point did you quit your job? Like, when is the right time? Is it when exactly once you replace your income, or what do you think?
I got fortunate in the sense that I was laid off from my high-paying consulting job, right? And I know it's crazy to think about, that's fortunate getting laid off, but that's kind of where my mindset has grown over the years, through all the books I've read and the podcasts I've listened to, and the people that I've surrounded myself with. Otherwise, it's hard. It's hard to walk away from a job, and you really shouldn't walk away from it until it's at the point that it's just really holding you back from growing, bigger than what you can do while having your job. Even if you've replaced your job income, but you have automation, which is very possible with short-term rentals, or you've hired that VA because you can afford to do that, you should still keep your job, because your job does keep opportunities open for you as far as loans and being able to look real credible to lenders and things like that. So there's nothing wrong with keeping it, but at some point, if you feel like your job is holding you back, and you've surpassed your job income consistently for 6 months or more, then it would be something worth considering, being able to quit your job. But first, asking yourself the question, like, by quitting my job, what is this going to allow me? What extra activities is this going to allow me to do that's going to allow my real estate business to grow even further and faster, right? Like, don't just quit because you've replaced your job income, but quit because there's a reason that you need to quit, because your job is either taking up too much time or holding you back, or something that's preventing you from really exploding your real estate business.
I love it. So I found you off social media. I'm curious, like, what does social media mean to you? Like, why did you start putting out content? I like talking about this a lot because it's done a lot for my business. So I want to quickly ask you and just see like why you do social media, and yeah, I'll add that journey.
Yeah, because social media is a great outlet for just adding value to people. Um, I created my mentorship program, my academy, surely because I had so many people coming to me asking for help with trying to escape corporate America, with trying to invest in real estate, with not knowing the right strategy, knowing the right things to do. So I used to take people to coffee and answer questions, but there's only so much you can do to help people in a 30-minute or 1 hour, lunch or coffee. So I created a structured academy to be able to teach people step by step my methodology. And I use social media as a means to continue to share that value, because there's so much to learn in real estate, from tactics and strategies to all the mindset stuff that needs to even prepare you on a personal level to be able to grow into this person you need to become, that's going to have this successful real estate business. So I use social media as that sounding board to help people, to give kind of daily nuggets, daily reinforcement. Because the thing I love about social media is, like, I'm older, but like I love this 1 minute attention span that you can learn something really valuable in. That what the successful people that I follow on social media, in 30 seconds, I'll get more out than I'll get out of reading an entire book now, right? And I can just scroll through 30-second, 1-minute clips, each one teaching me something new or something different. And so that's what I love social media for, is those little, infusions of knowledge and boosts of motivation that you can get from it to really keep people going and help people grow.
I love it. I love it a lot. So talk to me about your academy. Like, what's your goals with it? It sounds like a mentorship program. You're teaching people Airbnb. What are your goals with it? What are you trying to do there?
Yeah, so the Rehab with Ehab Academy is essentially my strategy that I figured out at 40 to be able to become financially free, right? Because 99% of the people that I talk to who ask me about real estate, when I ask them, why do you want to do real estate? It's because they want to be financially free. They want to live life on their terms, right? They want to be able to pass on a legacy business to their children. They want to be able to travel. They want to be able to do more for their family, like all the things that come with money and freedom. And so since 99% of the people I talk to were looking for that, I put together the academy to teach them step by step how to accomplish that. And it starts, one of the big lessons I learned is it's not just in how you operate. It's not just in operating short-term rentals, but it's in how you acquire the properties too, through the BRRRR strategy. So I teach everything from beginning all the way to operation to make sure that you're acquiring properties the right way, you're finding the right deals, you're going after the right deals, you're acquiring them in a way where you're buying them, you're renovating them, and you're refinancing so you can get your cash back, because that's an important part of being able to scale, is not having all your money tied up in that first deal. Even if it's a successful Airbnb that's paying you $6,000 a month in profit, like my first one was, if you have all of your money tied up in there and you didn't buy it right, then you're going to be stuck in the water for a really, really long time until you can save up enough money to, buy another property. So I really go through the whole cycle of how to find them, how to buy them right, how to add value to them. And by the way, the value that you add by operating, Jonah, I've got a story. I can't even tell you the forced appreciation that is created from operating short-term rentals. It's incredible. It's just kind of a bonus payout with short-term rentals. That's incredible, because I sold that sixplex that I was telling you about, and that was an eye-opening experience for me.
Well, what do you mean? Well, you can tell me about it. Well, now I want to know about it. What are you talking about with the forced appreciation?
I wanted to leave you with a cliffhanger because I wanted you to ask about it. So, the crazy thing that people don't realize, especially with these multifamily properties, is that, your properties are valued on the income that they produce, right? It's kind of the nature of multifamily properties. And so if you can force the property to create more income, then you can force the value of it to go up. So this sixplex, for example, I bought it for $230,000. I renovated it for another $300,000. And it appraised at $650 at the time, right? So I had about a little over $100,000 of equity in it when it appraised. And then like 2 years later, I moved all my loans to another bank. They appraised it again. But the thing about banks is that a lot of them will not use short-term rental income. So this bank 2 years later appraised it, and it came in at 675. So it didn't really go up a whole lot because they were only using long-term rental rates for the appraisals. But last year in 2023, I decided I'm going to sell this property. Mind you, the highest appraisal I had from an appraiser was 675. But I said, you know what? I'm going to appraise this thing, and I'm going to sell it at the cap rate that is based on its short-term rental income that it's generating. So the property was making about $180,000 a year gross. So $15,000 a month times 12 is $180,000 a year. So I calculated kind of the net operating income. I plugged that into a cap rate formula and all that. And I came back with a $1.3 million valuation, even though my highest appraisal was 675. And I put it on the market for 1.3 million, boldly believing that it was worth it. And I ended up selling it last year in August for 1.2 million.
Nice.
So it's crazy. So the highest appraisal I had was 675. Like I almost doubled what that appraisal, and that appraisal was only like a year and a half old from when I sold it last year. So it definitely didn't appreciate $600,000 in a year and a half. It was the fact that I listed it at its value based on its income that I was producing as an Airbnb, as a short-term rental. And my buyer who bought it saw that value and used a bank that also was able to factor in that short-term rental income. And sure enough, I sold it for 1.2 million, and it was a huge payday last year.
That's pretty crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
that could be a business strategy of its own, just like converting rentals into short-term rentals and then just reselling them. Because I mean,
Yeah,
that's
it's kind
quite
of
a
like a
pay.
midterm flip, like every two, hang on to it for 2 years, operate it, and then sell it,
Yeah. Did you ever get an appraisal? I'm just curious because now my gears are turning. Like, did you ever get like a short-term appraisal or a short-term rental appraisal where like you could have even refied that and gotten maybe like a 400 or 300K profit and then also kept it? I'm just curious. I was just throwing it out there.
Yeah, well, the bank that I use a local bank for my long-term loans. I was buying things with hard money and refinancing it with a local bank, and they just don't use short-term rental income. So it was a challenge. I've obviously lobbied with them to use that. I even you make the argument that, look, this is the real income this property is producing. Why can't it be used? And they'll just always go back to, well, if we ever had to take the property back, we're not going to operate it as a short-term rental. We'd have to operate it as a long-term rental. And so that's why we have to appraise it such. So, it kind of means that I end up having to sell it if I want to pull out my equity rather than just refinancing it. But it's okay. It's a good payday. And, I'm excited for the payday. Speaking of paydays, one other just kind of exciting bit of news is my 16plex I put on the market as well, because I've been operating it for 2 years now, and I have a buyer for that one. And it's also a super juicy deal. So it's definitely my new strategy of buying them, renovating them, operating for 2 years like as a short-term rental, and then putting them on the market and getting huge paydays.
Interesting. I feel like you should just I think we need to find you a bank that will refinance based off short-term rentals. I think that's an even bigger issue because it would be even cooler if you could just get, instead of necessarily selling all of these, but like just refining them out. Right? I don't know. I'm gonna throw it out there as a possible idea. Like,
Yeah.
that's a cool business strategy of just buying a 12 unit, whether they're cash flowing or not, kick out all the tenants, turn it into an Airbnb. Yeah, it just sounds like a way better midterm flip type of model. I like it a lot,
Mm-hmm.
which makes a lot of sense. So, um, so what are your goals right now? Like, what do you want to be doing social media wise, business wise? Like, where are you heading?
Yeah. So business wise, I definitely am all in on this multifamily short-term rental model. I'm gonna sell this 16plex. I have a buyer for it right now. Hopefully in 45 days or so, we close on it, and I'll pull out that equity and probably duplicate it with three or so more of these, right? And then just kind of rinse and repeat that. So I really enjoy what I'm doing. I actually now I didn't love the hospitality business, but now I love creating systems to create better experiences for my guests. So I'm starting to really thrive in that environment. And how can I keep training my VAs better? How can I keep creating better systems so that we can have more consistency and better operations? So that part I'm interested in. And it was really driven by the book Traction, which talks a lot about creating systems and
Great book.
SOPs. Yeah, great book here. I think I have it in the background here of me somewhere over here. So that I'm really excited about. Social media wise, I'm actually getting ready to start like really pushing the academy. I want to be able to help as many people as possible. I really think I figured it out. And I know there are a lot of people out there that are trying to figure it out. They're like, is flipping the right strategy? Is wholesaling the right strategy? Is sub two the right strategy? People are out there trying to figure it out. And I can tell you that most people want the dream. Most people don't want to just make an extra $100 a month as a landlord and call it a day. Most people want the dream. And I think those of us who have figured it out have an obligation to help people get there. Because being on the other side, being a full-time entrepreneur, being a full-time real estate investor, owning this business, playing the money game, all the things that you've read about in Rich Dad Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich, and all of the books that people read about trying to figure out this journey, when you get to the other side, is pretty incredible. And I think we all should be able to live our lives like this. I think we all work too much. We spend way too much time at the office and less time with family. And we owe it to ourselves with this one opportunity we have in this world to make the most of it and be able to live our life on our terms. So I'm going to keep pushing social media to grow the academy and grow the membership and help people accomplish that dream, because it's a dream that's worth fighting for.
I love it. I love it so much. Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds awesome. It sounds like a great thing. It's a cool strategy. I've never thought of the idea of like increasing the value of multifamily by changing it to short-term rental income instead of long-term rental income, because I can't even think of any other way to do that, right? Like,
yeah,
like what could you do other than a long-term rental type of income? So it's like maybe medium term rentals, but like at the same time, that's similar to Airbnb, right? So super interesting. I find that fascinating. So let's go into kind of just like one of my favorite things to ask about a lot is just like, so you mentioned Traction. What are some other books that have like really impacted your real estate journey?
Well, I mean, you have to definitely read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think that's a super important book for just getting your mindset in the right place in terms of thinking about how successful people think versus just average or poor people. That was a real eye opener to me, because again, when I mentioned earlier that I came from super middle class people, I don't think people understand how much differently the rich are doing things than just average people who are going to a job every day and getting a 9 to 5, and it's really important to start reprogramming your brain to think about your net worth versus your salary, and start looking at things in a really different way. So I would say that was a super important book. And the other one that I love is Secrets of the Millionaire Mind by T. Harv Eker. I think that's a really, really great book. I even like the audiobook version because I think T. Harv Eker is like a New Yorker. So hearing him read the book with his New York accent is pretty cool. It kind of helps hit the message home a little bit. And so I think those are two great books for people really getting started and really needing to get their mind in the right place. But more importantly than just reading books is the action that you take after that, right? So anybody who is listening and says, "Oh, well, I've read Rich Dad Poor Dad," well, my question would be like, well, what did you do about it, right? Like what was the action that you took from that book to actually make things start changing in your life, and are you taking the right actions? Because there's actions that you can take, but not all of them are the right actions that actually move the needle forward and start helping you build your real estate business, right? So I mean, it's really important to not just listen to podcasts, read books, read articles, get on bigger pockets, but it's important what you do with that information afterwards and the action that you take after receiving that information.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, like I 100% agree. Like with all of that, all the books are like super duper important to read. One of the last questions that I always ask on this podcast that I always really like knowing, if you could go back to when you were just starting in real estate, what would you change? What would you tell yourself then, knowing everything that you know now?
Yeah, well, considering that I made a 13-year mistake flipping, I would go back and tell myself, number one, believe in yourself. You're on the right path. The conversation you had with your parents about wanting to invest in real estate and wanting to do things differently from what my immigrant parents from Egypt, told me that I should do, like you're on the right track. Like I would want to tell myself that. Like don't go work for somebody until you're 65. Do what your heart is telling you to do and make a better life for yourself by investing and building wealth, right? So I would want to kind of confirm that with myself back then. But the second bit of advice, which would be the the really important piece of advice, would be wealth comes from owning properties, and building a real estate business comes from owning properties, and replacing your income at your job will come through owning properties and creating rental income, a rental business. So as quickly as you can, start buying and keeping properties. And I think that's probably advice that a lot of people wish they could tell themselves, because back then there were properties you could buy for $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. Even when I turned 40, this was 8 years ago. So even when I turned 40, the first 6 properties I bought, these single family homes I bought them for about $52,000 each. So it wasn't even that long ago that I was able to buy $50,000 homes in Houston here. Not in the best part of the town, of course, not in war zones either, but in lower income areas. But those houses today now are going for $175,000, $200,000. So I would say buy properties, keep them as soon as you can get your hands on them, and as soon as you can afford to keep them, because that is the wealth building strategy.
I love it. I love it so much. So my man, I'm getting close to the end of the podcast. Where can people find out about your academy? Where can people find you? I think you have an insane amount of value that you could add to my audience. How do people reach out to send you deals? Just how do people find out about everything you're doing?
Yeah, so my website's rehabwithehab.com, and you can also follow me on Instagram, Rehab with Ehab. I am passionate about helping people out. So if you have questions, send me a DM. I'm the one that responds to my DMs. Check me out on YouTube too, Rehab with Ehab. That's pretty much where you can find me. You might find some old air hockey videos of me too, where I was a former world air hockey champion. So
love it.
You might see a little bit of that in there too. It's one of those college hobbies that turned into something a little bit bigger than a hobby. But yeah, hit me up, send me a message. Let me help you navigate the journey. If your goal is financial freedom, especially, I would say I've mastered that, and I can help you be on the right track.
I love it. I love it so much. Cool, my man. Well, everybody reach out to him, send properties. If you want to join his community, reach out to him on Instagram. Ehab, you've been amazing. Is there anything else, last words for my audience before I wrap this up?
I mean, I would just say, believe in yourself, and don't underestimate the importance of working on yourself more than just working on learning the real estate tactics, because everything that you do is based on who you are. And so if you don't invest more time in your personal growth and who you are as a person, then the real estate won't even ever get started, right? So grow personally, become more disciplined in everything that you do, not just real estate, exercise, eating healthy, making your bed, all the things that make you a better person. And then your business success will come after that.
I love it. I love it so much. Cool, man. Well, yeah, stay after. I want to talk about also what I can do for you too. So stay after after I end this. But guys, next week, Skorch the Fears. And then after that, I'll be gone for 2 weeks. I'm going to Iceland with my dad. So, that's the benefits of doing real estate. You can do cool stuff like that, right? So love y'all. I'll see y'all next week, Thursday, 6 p.m. MST. Episode 126. We out. Skorch the Fears. Let's freaking go.